You know, Tania, you and I come from different political backgrounds, but I really respect the move because this is actually about the people. It's not about the party and the process. You hope the parties are the right vehicles, but Western Sydney needs a lot of love and attention, not taking them for granted. That's my comment about Western Sydney.
Yeah, I think One Nation right now is the only party that's actually prepared to go into bat for families and communities of southwest and Western Sydney who are absolutely desperate for common sense policies. I think they're very tired of this very left-wing agenda. Many of the communities out southwest Sydney are very, for example, highly observant with their particular faiths. In Bankstown, it's almost an 85% of people would recognise themselves as being religious. And yet this is a party, a Labor Party just simply makes a mockery of this. I was probably one of the very last and rare members of the Labor Party that was actually a person of faith. It was very, very difficult. I think I was ostracised as a shadow minister and as a caucus member because of that. And I think the Labor Party is just completely so far left now that they're incapable of representing the values and views of people out in southwest and Western Sydney.
Look, I know the Bankstown area well, and I understand exactly your point. I mean, Chris Minns and your former colleagues, they're going to be coming hard for you. I mean, are your constituents going to back you in? You know, if they come hard at you, have you got people around you?
Look, I've had a lot of support in recent months. I've had people coming into my elected office really disappointed with the way the Labor Party treated me. And they're generally they're disappointed with the Labor Party altogether. They can see that the party absolutely isn't paying any attention to southwest or Western Sydney. There have been no policies announced by Chris Minns or indeed by his front bench that are of any value or interest to people in southwest or Western Sydney. He completely is out of touch when it comes to understanding, I think, the vast majority of the views that are being espoused by people in Western Sydney. Like Mark and One Nation, I also believe in a robust education system that actually supports the fundamentals for young people and supports mums and dads and stops left-wing indoctrination. But that's not Labor Party policy at all. So you can see that the Labor Party is increasingly out of touch, I believe, with people in Western Sydney.
Yeah, and I think values are really important, and obviously you're a person of values, as Mark Latham is. I mean, One Nation, I mean, what is it about the party which appealed to you? You see this as a vehicle to promote these sorts of things, and obviously you and Mark would be, working strongly together.
Well, education's a good example. Also, I think One Nation and Mark's view on the natural resources industry, we've got a rich natural resources industry here in New South Wales that should be supported, be it coal and the forestry. But if it was up to the Labor Party, they will ban these industries. We know that they take their instruction when it comes to their energy policy from people that chain themselves to trees. That's what my biggest concern is about the Labor Party. I know some of these frontbench members of the Labor Party very well. I know their views. And it's not just, it's frightening what their views are when it comes to energy and electricity, but also legalising drugs, wanting to teach gender fluidity in schools. This is the agenda of some of these shadow ministers, and what Chris Minns is doing, and it's very cunning, he's suppressing that right now. He's told his extreme left members of his front bench to just back down, be quiet for now, let's get across the line, and then we'll deal with your agenda. But I know that many of these prominent front benchers do have very extreme views, and once they're elected, if they are elected, and let's hope not, come March, but they will push this agenda through. And part of the reason why I'm running for the upper house is that I don't want a Labor Party and the left controlling both chambers of Parliament in New South Wales.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's look at the way that Western Sydney has voted against what the Labor Party have touted in the past. The same-sex marriage debate was interesting.
Correct.
For instance, those people of faith stuck to their faith. They didn't follow the politics. I mean, Labor's sort of taking the vote in Western Sydney a lot for granted. I reckon a lot of people in Western Sydney, well, they're going to cop that economic impact of all this wokish rush to renewables. I mean, the costs of electricity, the availability of electricity, jobs, they're all issues. They're real issues for people.
Absolutely, Gary, but it's also an issue for people out in the regions. I think about when I was the Shadow Minister for Natural Resources, I met a number of people out in towns across New South Wales in the forestry industry, and I felt so sorry for these workers because they're members of a union that pay affiliation fees to the Labor Party, but yet the Labor Party doesn't represent their views. They want to ban the forestry industry in New South Wales. They want to ban coal in New South Wales. They're not interested. I was a lone voice in that Shadow Ministry cabinet often, and I felt that I was absolutely worried when I was in the Shadow Ministry, what sort of a government would we be? And that's why I'm delighted that I've left the Labor Party. I could see no hope in the Labor Party. I don't think Labor is ready to govern in March. I think they've still got a lot to learn from their past mistakes, but at the same time, they haven't been honest with the public about their agenda. They're not honest about what some of their frontbenchers are really about.
Yeah, well, Western Sydney, is a big part of Middle Australia. I mean, Di Lee, the member for Fowler, I think she proves a lot of quiet Australians in the cultural and linguistic communities. They're not happy with where things are going. This left agenda is frightening a lot of the immigrant groups in and around Australia. Absolutely,
and that's where the work that Mark Latham and One Nation have done in pushing for reform in education is so important. We can see the academic levels are falling in the last 20 years. We can see that schools are not being given the support they need to ensure that the focus should be on literacy, numeracy, history and humanities and on jobs or ensuring that we can get these kids into jobs. So the problem there is that you've got an agenda there of a left-wing indoctrination that many of these Labor Party caucus members actually back. And that's what concerns me greatly. And I think come March, what I hope to see is I'd love to see One Nation have the balance of power in the upper house, because I think that'll be the only way to stop New South Wales from going both woke and broke. So I think people are tired of the major parties, Gary, and I think particularly out in southwest and Western Sydney, people are tired of the Labor Party.
Well, the Liberal Party have got some issues on the left as well. I mean, but
absolutely.
In the end,
they do.
Which is somebody who's been involved in the Liberal Party since he was 14. So a long time ago. I get dismayed at. But I mean, ultimately, it's going to be a battle between Dominic Perrottet, who had the guts to actually say, let it rip, let's get the economy going again, and Chris Minns, who looks pretty smooth. I mean, ultimately, it's going to be better for New South Wales in that top job.
Well, I just hope that people aren't hoodwinked by what Chris Minns and the Labor Party are doing right now, because they're keeping very quiet. They're suppressing their real agenda. He's deliberately telling some of his frontbenchers not to be transparent about what their real views are. And that's why I'm concerned. I do know that some of these frontbenchers want to see drugs being legalised in New South Wales. I know they want to see gender fluidity being taught in schools. And that's the sort of policies that I'll oppose, which is why I want to be, I hope to be selected as a One Nation candidate by the One Nation members and actually represent the real views of people of southwest and Western Sydney and indeed New South Wales who are really desperate for common sense policies.
Tania, are there others like you, either in the parliamentary or organisational parts of the Labor Party, who feel as aggrieved but haven't had the guts to do what you've done?
Oh, look, I know of party members recently that have left. At least 50 or 60 have left from the Bankstown electorate alone. And they've left for a number of reasons, not just because I left, but also because they've been tired of the Labor Party for a very long time and they don't believe that they can relate to the views of the Labor Party anymore. But I'm not really sure if there's too many caucus members left that share my view. I am concerned that the party has taken a real shift to the left in New South Wales, and I think people out here, the voters out there, need to be concerned as well and really ask the questions, what do you stand for, Chris Minns, and what does your front bench stand for? Let's start seeing some honest views come forward, because we know that they have some very left-wing views that they're just simply suppressing for the time being. I'm delighted to be part of One Nation, Gary, and I think that One Nation under Mark's leadership, we're a united group with Rod as well, Rod Roberts, I've been given great support to date by both of those gentlemen, and indeed by many party members who've contacted me and are delighted that I've joined One Nation. So I'm looking forward to hopefully being on the Legislative Council ticket and to continue my work in fighting for people and families in southwestern Western Sydney.
Well, Tania Mihailuk, you're certainly bringing something to the table. Congratulations for that. Value is very important. Thank you so much for joining us today. I wish you all the very best in the weeks ahead, and we should keep in touch.